Good afternoon, everyone out there in YouTube land. My name is Jared, and this is my channel, Mazda P3K. This video, we're going to work on rebuilding the entire shifter on my 1995 Mazda Miata MX-5 because it's clapped out. So without further ado, let's get started. As I just mentioned, the star of today's show is this guy. See that? It's not supposed to do that. It's that sloppy because there's a whole system of bushings and whatnot underneath this. And I assure you, they're shot. There's also some gear oil down here that we are going to need to change out. So that's what we're doing today. But before we can do all that, we need to take this center console piece that runs all the way back here. That's got to come out. And there is a series of JIS standard screws that need to come out. So starting in the back where our switches are for the trunk and the gas cap lock, there are two here. And then under either our ashtray or cup holder, depending on what you have installed, we have one there. And then up in the front, where the center console piece meets up with what's colloquially called the tombstone, we have one here on the driver's side, and we have one there on the passenger side. So get all of those out, and if I remember right, this should just kind of lift out of here. And what we're probably also going to need to do is unscrew the shifter ball so that we can lift this mangled boot out of the way. And that just, as you can see, it just unscrews just like that. So let's get that knocked out, get this out of the way, and see what we're working with. Okay, so once you get here, you might see some differences depending on the model or the trim level of Miata you have. You see there's some extra wiring here. This is for if you had the model that has power locks and power windows. I believe this extends down to where the power lock, power window button goes right here. I do not have that, so I just have a stub. And then if you look over here, you can see this upper big boot is torn. It's going to need to come out. And you can see that it is held in place by 1, 2, 3, 4, what I believe to be 10 millimeters. So we're going to need to get that out of here. There's also, we have this upper bushing here. And I think we will worry about that whenever we actually go to take the shifter tower out, which is these three smaller bolts here. One thing to keep in mind is do try to keep an eye out on your hardware as you take this out, because if something falls in here, it is falling into a portion of your transmission. So bad news bears. Another thing, you may or may not have a big piece of insulation here. I don't, so I'm going to guess somebody's been in here before. It might even have been me. But if you have it, great. If you don't, you can get this as the correct cut piece from various retailers. It's supposed to help a little bit with the heat and the noise. It's a 90s Miata. I mean, these things weren't big on creature comfort, so take it as you will. We're going to get that 10 millimeter. We're going to take these guys out so we can get this upper boot out. Yep, it is indeed a 10. I'm generally pretty good when it comes to metric stuff, but I am terrible at sizing stuff that's an SAE. Terrible. My family teases me about it because I'm more comfortable with metric than I am SAE. So what I'm doing is, as I'm getting stuff out, I'm just tossing it over here in the driver's floorboard, so I know that my pile of screws and whatnot over here is all part of what I'm working on right now. Okay, now, let's see this. If you feel like you need to, you could take a trim tool, pop this off, I'm gonna just try to work around it so I don't have to worry about that. Let's see if we can't get this upper boot off. Oh my. She's in there tight. I don't think this is actually glued in. I think this thing is just kind of frozen here from being here for 30 years. Or, no, 20. No, 30. This car's 30 years old this year. So I'm gonna work on prying this up. And I'll get back with you. But we do need to get this out. Or I'll back up. If this is in good shape for you and it's not blown out up here, cool, leave it be. You still got to remove it and work around it, but you don't need to replace it, right? But mine is obviously blown out. It's, it's cratered. I think it's supposed to go up to this guy right here. And we got to take care of that. Okay, what I didn't know is the boot is glued or bonded to this metal plate. So the whole plate's got to come up. I gave her a good yank and it came up, and that was that. So now we're here and you can see the top of the transmission here. Here's the tunnel with the transmission. So now we're to these three little dudes, which I want to say these are 8s, but this needs to come out in order for us to get the rest of the shift tower out. And we need to get the shift tower out because we need to service some bushings and whatnot that are on the other side of this. So let's go ahead, get an 8mm, get this guy out. All right, I got that wrong. Those were 10s. So there we go. All right, so there's one of those bushings I talked about. And I'm happy to see, oh, there's supposed to be 2 pins here. If I remember right. Well, there's only a spot for one, but that pin's supposed to hold this in place. But anyway, you see we have some gear oil here. This is what's called, again, kind of colloquially, it's called the turret. And one of the things we need to do is we're going to need to get as much of this out as we can. And then we need to refill it. It's supposed to get, I think, 90 milliliters. It's like 1/4 of a cup or something like that. And we'll get to that. But we got to take care of all of our bushings and washers and things like that. But at this point, we've kind of completed the teardown. We're not going to have to dig any deeper. One last thing we will have to do is slide this pin out. That pin is required. It acts as a retainer. It's supposed to hold all this stuff in. Okay, next step for us is we need to get this fluid out. You can use those bulbs you use to flush out your ears kind of thing, or your nostril. Snot suckers, if you remember if you've had kids and had to use those with your babies. One of those, or you can use one of the hand-powered fluid extractors that you can pick up at your local parts store. We're going to take that. This one's rather beat up, and we're going to feed it into this. This is not ideal. Something about that tall would be ideal. I do not have something like that. I don't feel like chopping this up. So I'm going to pump this out. Now, when you pulled your shift tower out, on the very end where the little ball is, there should have been a bushing. Plastic one. If this vehicle is new to you, or you've not done maintenance, it may be cracked and gone. And you're going to need to find it and fish it out of here once you get the fluid level low enough. So keep an eye out for that as you get the fluid out, however you choose to do it. Wanted to pause to show you guys this. So you can see there's kind of 2 distinct areas where fluid can come out. There's where the ball sits, and then there's kind of this area off to the side. We want to try to hit both places with however you're doing this. Just wanted to kind of point that out. And what came out of here was basically coal black. So I don't think this has been serviced anytime recently in my case. Like I said, coal black and nasty. Once you've gotten out pretty much everything you can do finishing with, soaking stuff out with a paper towel. And then we're ready to move on to the next steps. Okay, let's talk about the kit for a second. I got mine from 5X Racing. It is a complete rebuild kit. It has, that's the bushing cap I was talking about. It goes on the end of the shifter. And then you've got all your other bushings and washers that you need for your rebuild. And then you get the option, you can pick to have a new upper boot, which I did right here. And you also get, this is what's called the inner boot. You get a new one of those. There's actually a gasket there. You see this mounts, should mount on top of the shifter tower, the thing that we've taken out of the way. So you can get that. And if you so desire, for extra money, you can get this upgraded to the, I think it's a brass bushing right there. And if you're doing racing and things like that, it's better. But this vehicle is not going to be driven every day. It's going to be my let's go out and have fun on the weekends car. So plastic is good enough for me. Remember how I talked about how this pin was holding stuff in? You see that? There's one of those plastic washers right there. So what you need to do is, through some method, you can use a punch or whatever, you got to kind of push this pin out of here. Then you can get this washer out. I mean, alternatively, you could break it and get it out, but you do need to get a replacement in. So really, you still need to get the pin out. And there's supposed to be some metal washers up here. Springy, wavy washers. Wave washers or spring washers, which is these guys right here. I don't have them, so my theory is somebody was in here and they attempted a rebuild and they didn't do it right. It would line up with what I've seen on other parts of the vehicle. Okay, so I had my order of operations wrong. After I pulled out the old one of these here, I found two wave washers or two spring washers that were underneath it. So that's where those were. I got them all out. Now, my new kit comes with two wave washers that are just regular wave washers. And then it comes with one that has teeth on it. And those line up perfectly with this bushing, which winds up on the shift tower. It does not go on your bushing that's going to drop back into the turret. So don't try to shove it on there. This guy, the one that goes in the turret, it's got the notch for the pin. Don't do that. Instead, you're going to take these guys and you're going to get them in position. Just drop them in. So 1, and 2. Except for I didn't drop that in right. 1, under the pin you go. I decided to try this without removing the pin because I really feel a little lazy. I didn't feel like trying to go get a punch, so I was able to get the old. I used a pick to get the old bushing out. So we're going to do that, and then we need to go ahead and try to sneak in our. Yeah, we'll be able to get it in there, but it's gonna have to push it in by using it. Oh, wait, there it went, just like that. Okay, cool. So I was wrong. You do not need to remove the pin. You can just kind of sneak this in there with your two spring washers underneath. So with that, we're done with what we got to do over here on the turret side. And if you want to go ahead and put in fresh fluid here, look at that. Did I get it? Those little chunks, what I'm trying to get out with my finger here, that's the remains of the plastic bushing. It's supposed to go on the end of the shift tower. See that? Yeah. Okay. We'll cover the fluid here in a second. Okay, so next order of business is we need to cut out the remains of the inner boot, which is all of this right here. The best way to go about this is take the sharp object of your choice, carefully cut through this, get it out of the way. Once that's done, there should be enough clearance with this metal plate that it will just slide off the shaft. But just be really careful when you do this, because generally your metal object of choice, your sharp implement, you know, you mess up, you're going to slice yourself up good. So be careful with this step. So as you can see, took my sharp object of choice, cut away inner boot. Here's the plate, slides off. And once you do that, you've got this fella. You look familiar? That's your plastic bushing with the grippy spring washer. Now note that the spring washer sits on top. So it goes in, spring washer on top. We'll just slide this guy out too. All right, at this point, she's naked. Oh man. So there's supposed to be a plastic bit that goes right here, and it's gone. That's what's left right there. So normally there's a plastic piece. Let's see, it looks like this when it's brand new. Whoops. And we'll clean that out with a pick probably. But there's also supposed to be like that plastic bushing sitting here, and obviously that's gone. So anyway, we'll clean that out. We're going to clean this up, hit it with some lube, just kind of get this thing cleaned up, and then we'll start reassembly with new bits. So believe it or not, I'm having to drill the remains of this out because there's nothing for me to lever on to try to get it out the way you normally would. So I'm just kind of having to do that without accidentally drilling in the metal. But this should be hardened steel, so you're not gonna drill into that easily. So let me get all this junk cleared out. All right, there we go. I had to drill it, and then I had to switch picks, and I had to spray it to clean it out, but piece is in, it's flush. So we have started with our repair. So remember, we learned that this goes on with the spring washer side up, like so. We also need to go ahead and put our cap back on there. So this is pretty straightforward, you know, put it on the flat surface and push. Make sure you do have it the right way, because you can see that's smaller, that's bigger. So if you got this backwards, you're going to be in for a bad time. There we go. Just like that. Okie doke. So we got that. We got this. The next thing we need to do is our inner boot. We're going to slide that down, and it's going to need to... I'm not sure if this is part of the shifter itself or this is a remnant from the inner boot. I'm really not 100% on that, because it looks like it's part of the old shifter, but it's going to come down, and it needs to catch, I think, on this lip, so that it makes a good seal through here. And once we've done all that, we can go ahead and fill the turret with some fresh fluid and then drop this guy in. So lube this up. I'm going to use some PB Blaster here so we can try to slide this down. Okay. But you see, that's not where that needs to be. Push that down a little further. I think it's supposed to sit up there like that. And I think that rubber lip keeps it from going any further, keeps it sealing up here. But in any case, this thing's rebuilt, so we can go ahead and bring this back to the car. All right, let's talk about fluids real quick. So I am using Redline MT90, not because I want to go fast, but because this was literally the only thing I could get my hands on today where I live that was the compliant oil, which is kind of sad, but that's where we are today. So what this is exactly is a 75W90 gear oil, which you can find that plenty But the trick is it needs to be GL4 compliant. Not GL5, GL4 compliant, not GL5 compliant, GL4 only compliant. The reason for this is because we're using this in a transmission that has synchronizer gears. And the additives that they put in GL5 compliant oils tear up synchronizer gears. So we do not use that. We use GL4. And here in the beginning of 2025, I guess it's getting kind of hard to find GL4 only oil. Anyway, now that you know more about oils than you probably ever wanted to know, we're going to pour into here. I'm not going to be able to film it because I don't have enough hands. But basically, I'm going to put it back to probably about the level below our washers and bushing. It's supposed to be 80, 90 milliliters, about a quarter of a cup. I'm just going to eyeball it, you know, and just kind of go with it. Okay, there we are. That's what fresh MT90 fluid looks like. I guess it doesn't have the sulfurs in it, or my sense of smell's gotten really bad, because normally when you work with gear oil, it's very sulfurous and stinky. But as you can see, I just filled it up to the bottom where that plastic bushing is, and that's what we're doing. Now, when we go to reinsert our shifter, there is only one way it can go because of the pin, right? So you just kind of move it around until you get it to kind of drop in. Come on. There it goes. I think it just went. Okay. Then we got our inner boot. We need to reseal this. Because remember, there's a gasket there. You know, spin it around if you need to. And then we'll reseal it once I make sure I got this thing seated right, which feels like I did because I can't twist it now. Wow, that's so much better. And we'll talk about putting these bolts in, because everywhere I read, I hear reports of people like snapping bolts, which that's weird to me, but we'll talk about it in a second. Okay, concerning these turret bolts, I think they have a torque spec of 90 inch, and this is very important, inch pounds. So just like when you're doing regular measurements, 12 inch pounds equals 1 foot pound, or pound foot, I think is actually the correct designation. So 90 inch pounds is something like a little over, it's like 8.5 pound foot, which if you've ever used a torque wrench is basically nothing. It's the lightest and most gentle of elbow torques. I mean, it's tight enough that your ratchet should be able to, you know, do the ratchet on its own. But once you begin to feel it get snug, I mean, that's basically it. So you don't need to make these crazy tight, because you also got to think about the gasket that's underneath, right? Anywho's, if you've never, you know, worked with that, now you know. Inch pounds, very tiny, not much going on. There we go. Like that's it, right there. All right, get this last guy here. So you notice I'm doing the vast majority of my tightening just with my fingers. I'll get that last one, and then we'll come back and we're going to handle the upper boot. And after that, we're basically done, right? Looks like I overfilled just a hair. Got a little bit of fluid coming up. I noticed that whenever I was first getting the inner boot on. And also make sure that you don't have like I'll call it a Z-axis stress, or like a diagonal stress between where you screwed this in and where this is sitting, because over time that will cause a crack and a failure in that direction. So that's why I'm kind of twisting this a little bit. But it's going to clean that up. And if I spill a tiny bit, then I spill a tiny bit, but I thought that my calibrated eyeball was pretty good on that one. All right, now we need to do the So if you take a look here, you'll notice that there's kind of a foam gasket that goes around here. And I think this is not the whole fluid. This is more for smells, really. So that you don't, if you have a leak or, you know, you got some funky outdoor smell, this is to keep it from seeping into the cabin. So anyway, same kind of deal that you did with the inner boot. You might want to lube this back up again. I won't do that anymore because I don't want to get demonetized. But lube that back up with something, lubricant of your choice, and then slide this boot down to where it seats in position, which is probably about right there. And at that point, all you're doing is putting the center console back on, putting the shift knob back on. You're good to go. Alrighty, folks. I replaced this aftermarket boot, or replaced the boot with aftermarket. We'll see how it holds up. Kind of just hit the bits in there. May redo this, but anyway, the important thing is, remember earlier it was super sloppy and wiggling all over the place. I'm giving it the same amount of force, and you know, it's staying put. First, second, third, fourth, fifth, first, reverse. That's much better. One of the issues I had when I was driving this is you had a hard time going from first, either if it was second or fourth. And that's because of how sloppy everything was. And now that's much better. So I'm going to call this a good repair.